My name is Bob Doyle, and I'm with the firm Smith Group JGR. We were selected last month to help lead the effort to look at the downtown streets in general throughout the DDA and develop some guidelines for improving those streets, and then specifically to look at Main Street from east to west end and develop some very specific designs to help improve the street. And so we have a great team on board to help us with that as part of our group, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Lori Singleton with Smith Group JGR. I'm a landscape architect.
I'm Caitlin Malloy-Marcon with MKSK Studios, and I'm a transportation planner.
Wes Butch with DLZ, working on traffic and road engineering.
And I'm Brad Streeter, also with MKSK, a transportation planner.
So, in order to start tonight, we want to loosen things up a little bit and get people talking right away, because the last thing we want you to do is have to listen to us for 40 minutes before you get a chance to talk. So we're going to have a little warm-up and introductory exercise for about 20 minutes. Then we're going to give a presentation on what we've seen in downtown initially, as well as a presentation on some best practices. What are other people doing in communities throughout the state and throughout the nation to revitalize their downtown streets? And then we'll have a small group discussion, so at your tables you'll have a discussion amongst yourselves about what you think about the downtown streets. And then we'll summarize that and get everybody out at 8, and perhaps we can all catch the tail end of the concert. I'm glad that there's no windows in here, because it'd be hard to stay put. But so at this point in the process, we are just starting. So we are at day one, essentially. So we haven't designed anything, we haven't sketched anything. We have some initial impressions about the downtown streets, and all of us on the team have worked in Midland on other projects over the years, so we're all familiar with your community. But we're really here tonight to get some of that initial input, so that when we do start putting the pencil to paper on Monday, that we've got some background. And so what you're here to help us with is provide some of that background about how you feel about downtown. So how we're going to start is we want to go around the room in a round-robin fashion very quickly, and we want you to tell us if you could change one thing about downtown Midland, you would ... Okay? And I want it in 10 words or less. No theses. Okay? So who wants to go first? What would you do?
Frankie Bach.
More amperage on the poles for more downtown events.
And by amperage, you mean power.
You betcha.
Electricity. Who's next?
You don't need a 90.
Close Main Street to traffic.
Okay, no cars on Main Street.
Bring items downtown. We don't have to shop to be here, like the library or museums that are open. You can just wander.
Okay.
All right.
So other activities outside of eating and shopping? I'm gonna get my exercise.
I don't want to close the traffic down, but I would like to see the traffic slowed down at the Santa House. We're going to get kids hurt.
All right. Good idea.
Slow traffic at the Santa House. Oh, all the way. Go back and forth.
Okay, somebody over here next.
I would like to enhance the outdoor seating for the restaurants downtown, so you can really enjoy an evening with not just a little sidewalk.
Yeah. I've got some thoughts on that too. You want to?
More parking downtown.
All right. Are you a merchant or a visitor or a resident? Okay.
More restaurants and bars, aka more nightlife.
All right.
Downtown housing.
All right.
Hey, people living downtown. Who else?
way to connect the parking ramp to downtown because nobody uses it.
All right, link to the parking deck.
Grocery store, different types of things, dry cleaning, whatever things that you need if you live down here.
Okay, great.
Neighborhood services.
I'd like to see more outdoor eating and street music.
Excellent.
Music, that's great.
Snow melt, as they have in some cities on the west side.
I get applause for that one.
So they put an asterisk on that.
Somebody has to say it, easier walking for the seniors at Riverside Place.
All right.
More unique spots like a fireplace or fountain.
Special moments. Let's see what else.
Every storefront full.
Who else? Anyone else? Hannah.
I'd like to see the other side of the river incorporated into downtown.
Ah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah, one of the
Oh, sure.
North of M20/Jerome. We have Emerson Park, we have a beautiful part of the rail trail, we have the Historical Society, the Alden Dow Post Street Archives area. That is also part of downtown. Let's not forget it. Okay, linking to the north. Anyone else? That's a really nice, broad set of goals. Okay, thank you.
All right, so now you have to sit and listen to us talk. But keep in mind that we're going to show you some things that we hope will spark some interest and discussion. Some of those ideas I think you've already hit on. What we want to set the tone for tonight, though, is to think about your downtown, and particularly Main Street, in an aspirational way. So let's think of it beyond just, not to pick on you, but let's think of it beyond just let's take the pavers out. Let's think big picture about how we want the downtown to feel, what's going to bring people downtown to shop and dine and be entertained, and what's it going to take to make downtown even more vibrant than it is. Because I think from our perspective, the downtown's on a pretty solid footing. And so it's really just about taking where you are right now and seeing how we can use good street design to ratchet up and raise the bar a little bit and make it a more vibrant place. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to start the slides.
All right. So this is just a reminder of the geographic area that we're talking about, the downtown, the DDA boundaries. So if you can kind of see, it's a little hard to see with the lights on, but there's a red line that outlines the entire district. So we're talking all the way from the ballpark to Jerome, or 20. And so we're looking at it, we're going to look at the main concentration on Main Street, but again, the streetscaping will go throughout the entire downtown. So this is an image, all of these black kind of geographic shapes, or geometric shapes, I should say, are the buildings, the outline of the buildings in downtown. And we're going to flip from this, and I want you to keep this image in your mind to the next image, which is going to show you the parking. And we had someone mention earlier that we need additional parking, and then Bob, if you can go back to the buildings. So again, buildings, flip again, parking. There is probably more surface area taken up by parking than there is by actual physical structures in your downtown. So is it a matter of actually needing more parking, or maybe better labeling that parking, connecting the parking through the streetscape so people feel comfortable and they actually want to go from some of those outlying lots into the core of the downtown? Or working with the restrictions, the time restrictions, maybe it's you want to jump into a coffee shop for 10 minutes, but you can't find anywhere in that couple block radius, so then it's not even worth your trip to the coffee shop. So maybe we adjust that and put some 15-minute spots in front of the coffee shop and put some of the hour spots out further. So it's really just trying to understand the needs of how people use the downtown with those individual uses, and then trying to tailor that parking to the way you actually use your downtown. Because from this image, we know that there's a lot of parking available. And I would bet that if we went out there at a peak time when everybody says that there's no parking available, and we counted some of those outer lots, that there's lots of parking available, it's just not at the most convenient spots. So how do we make it okay for people to park at a further out parking spot and feel okay walking into the downtown? How do we make that work? This next image, this next map is just showing your clustering of land uses. So we've got institutional uses here in light blue, your core commercial in this dark red, office kind of in the pink color, and then residential in your outlined yellow. And so again, it's talking about how people use each of those individual parcels and what that streetscape should look like for those uses. So maybe it's not the same throughout. There could be themes and threads that go throughout your downtown to make it seem like one cohesive place. But maybe there needs to be a lot of street seating and street dining area for this core area for bars and restaurants. But then is that really important for office buildings and residential? Do we really need that type of space available? Probably not. So what else can we do there? Can we put in things like rain gardens or larger flower beds and those sorts of things that would be better suited for those areas? So it's really thinking about connecting the streetscape to the uses that are in the buildings and what those clusters look like. And then finally, this is kind of just clustering those even further, kind of what we were just talking about, but really showing your green space, your core downtown, and then some of the outlying uses as well, and trying to think about it in those clusters rather than individual buildings. And again, making the streetscape fit that and work with all of those zones, if you will. So now we're going to get into some existing conditions, and Lori is going to introduce those.
So where are we, how are we starting? Midland today, downtown today, everyone's familiar with it, we use it on a regular basis, we know what we like about it, we know what's difficult, we know that some of the paving is deteriorating, some of the pavers have settled and you trip at the curb. We know that some of the electrical doesn't work very well. We don't have all of the power needs that we need. Some of the technology in the light fixtures is outdated and not very efficient. There are systems that need to be upgraded, and there are conditions that need to be replaced. And when we start planning for that and we're thinking about that, we don't want to say, okay, we'll just pick it up and put it right back in the way it is. Let's think critically about how we want the downtown to perform for ourselves so that it's the best downtown environment we can make. So that's what we're here to talk about, that there are all of these different priorities in a downtown street. There's walking, there's shopping, there's parking, there's selling. All of these things have to kind of compete for this same area, and how do we want that to work in the way that best suits it while we have this opportunity to make these changes. So again, you can kind of get a glimpse of this, and we're all familiar with the kind of crumbling crosswalks and the ramps at the intersections, some of the plantings that are doing well, some that aren't doing as well. You know, we have benches and seating that are located in places where aren't always where you really want to sit. And so we want to take this opportunity to be really thoughtful about that.
Okay, so we're going to go through a series of slides that show some of the best practices. As I mentioned before, some of these come from neighboring Michigan-based communities, and others are from around the country. But best practices generally are those ideas and techniques that have demonstrated over some time now that they contribute to the vitality of a downtown. So we're looking at really the economic vitality of downtown. We're also looking at the cultural vitality of downtown as a place to enhance your quality of living as Midland residents. So we tend to think about these things in terms of activities. So what are the best practices related to walking, to cycling, to driving, to parking, sitting, shopping and eating, celebrating, your community events, managing and maintaining, because somebody's got to make sure that the snow is gone and that the flowers look good. And then lastly, we kind of have a catch-all of some ideas under enjoying the urban environment.
And I think just to this point, a lot of times when streetscapes have been designed, especially 20, 30 years ago when this streetscape was designed, the thinking was, what are all the things we want, what kind of light poles and what kind of planters and what kind of pavement, and then you put all those parts together and you have your streetscape. What we'd like to do is actually step back and say, what are the things we want to do there? How do we want to do that? What are the most important activities so that we can make that successful and then make it beautiful in the process? So we're not driving it kind of with this, just what does it look like? It really has to work well, and that's what we want to make sure that we're all out. We would like to come out of tonight saying, what are the most important functions of this street for you? If it's all about parking and we just like put a parking lot down the street, you know, it's kind of like whatever those priorities are should help us define how we use this real estate in the street. There's only so much to work with. So that's kind of where we want to come out, because there are many different ways to approach it.
So under walking, you have to think about the streetscape and the sidewalk zone and gauge it for the volume of traffic that you have, and you have to make it comfortable and for all users, right? As you referenced earlier. So whether you have a couple people walking down the road like we have on the far left, or you have a massive crowd, which is actually in Denver. I was just there last weekend. You know, you have to be able to say, what's that important width of sidewalk, and how do people get through? And then once you accommodate those people getting through, then what's remaining? And how do we use that other space? Because if you want outdoor dining, that's great, because you know that a lot of restaurants are going that way, and they count on that space for enhancing their patrons' experience and also enhancing their own ability to gain some revenue. But if you don't leave space for that, you have to deliberately do it. So we think about walking, and we also think about walking in terms of it's not just humans necessarily, it might be dogs, and it's not just people who are fully able-bodied, right? We met this afternoon with the Riverfront residents and heard very strongly that one of their concerns is the pavers and how they're able to access across them when they're using a walker. So we have to think about those things. We also have to think about where are people using the street, right? If you look at the image on the right, the crosswalk is actually in the bottom of the picture. You see the little stop bars? But where the people are actually crossing is 20 feet away from that. So you have to really observe and understand how people are going to move through your project in your downtown and accommodate that. I know this happens to be a group of high school students and you can't tell them a whole lot. But at the same time, I haven't seen too many fully fledged adults you can tell much to either in terms of where they want to walk. So we have to accommodate that.
So the idea here is best practices, and just a couple questions to help us get to know you a little bit. And we are talking loud and using mics because this is being recorded if you hadn't noticed. A couple questions. How many of you are downtown at least 2 or 3 times a week? And how many live downtown or within a few blocks of downtown? Business owners or operators? How many of you have lived in Midland for at least half your life? And how many have lived in Midland for 10 years or less? Okay, that's a good cross-section. So you've seen a lot of things, and we're looking at sort of best practices, and then we travel a lot, work in a lot of other cities, and use some of our images. And one of the reasons they're doing the downtown is to look at best practices and see how we can elevate Midland and stay competitive with other downtowns in Michigan and around the country, and even beyond the country. So one thing is bicycling, and we talked to them about cyclists today, so there's different things. We'll be having some exercises with you later, and our plan will have different facilities or types for cycling. So you have what's called a Shero, or we have in Midland Share the Road, which is kind of reminders for people that the bikes have the legal right to be in the street. Sometimes you can have a bike lane, a one-way bike lane. Kind of the latest trend around the country is 1 or 2-way separated bikeways, or sometimes called cycle tracks, where it's along the street, but it's separated from the sidewalk and from the travel lane. And there's different ways of accommodating bikes on some streets, on all streets, of bike parking and so forth. So that's one thing we'll be looking at. Just a couple other images. Some places have turn an on-street parking space into bike parking in the street instead of on the sidewalk. Different ways of designing the street to accommodate bikes. You've got to balance the bikes the vehicles, the cars, the service vehicles. Bob mentioned the pedestrians. What we're trying to look is the right balance, and it might mean a different design on different streets depending on the priority for that street.
I think one of the things this slide points out to me too is the image on the left shows young children on bicycles. So not everybody is comfortable in a bike lane. So you have to think about if you want to encourage bicycling and mobility that way, how do the non-bike lane users accommodated within the sidewalk? Now I like to make a joke on the image on the right. That's downtown Houston, which has bike lanes throughout it. And I think it's kind of funny that if you can get bike lanes in the capital of the fossil fuel industry in the United States, we ought to be able to get bike lanes in other places where they're needed.
I was talking to a couple of bicyclists in town today that are in the full gear and real avid, and I said, because some prefer to just be in the street and don't want bike lanes and so forth, and both of them said they would prefer a bike lane because they just don't always feel comfortable in downtown Midland sharing the road with the cars. Speaking of cars, and we talk driving here, but it's also trucks and all types of vehicles and service vehicles, and we're looking at different types of circulation. One idea is one-way versus two-way. We've got some one-way streets and two-way, and there's pros and cons to both. A one-way system tends to have higher speed. Pedestrians only have to look one direction. You can get more volume through. It's got a lot higher capacity, often because you've got more room in one lane of direction. You have more room for things like bike lanes or on-street parking. Two-way is easier to find your way around, tends to be a little slower, tends to have a few more crashes, longer delays in intersections, might prevent having bike lanes or parking on both sides. So there's pros and cons to both. So we will be looking at one and two lane. The trend around the country now is generally to look at converting one way to two way. You don't see many two ways being converted to one way. So that's a change in the last 10 years.
And a lot of what's driving that change is there are economists who specialize in downtown development and what it takes to create a thriving downtown from a business standpoint. And they will tell you very clearly that the more legible and readable a downtown is for the visitor, the more likely they are to shop there and spend money there. And so we'll be looking at different alternatives in the next month to that, and we'll bring those back to you and get your feedback on that.
We've taken counts. We looked at historic counts. Midland, when the employment was different and you had high peak, the 1 hour moved traffic through because the volumes were a lot higher than they are now, and now the traffic is more spread throughout the day. There's a lot of studies now that show the economic impact of one versus two way and so forth. And we're also going to be looking at the intersections. So in the downtown you have signalized intersections. We'll be looking at, well, maybe those would be just through on Main Street and just stopping the side streets, or maybe four-way stops. So we're also looking at alternative types of intersection design besides what's out there today. Another idea is they call it a shared street. Kind of in Europe, it's called a Werner. There's other terms. And this idea is there might be some streets that are really designed to be a mixture of service, vehicles, pedestrians, bikes, everybody sharing the street, very low speed. In some cases, the street is elevated, so it's flush with the sidewalk instead of being recessed and you step down the curb. So this is something that can be looked at for part of the downtown, and it's really effective for using it for plazas and festivals and so forth. Where a couple of you mentioned slowing the speeds down. This is a way to really slow vehicles down. So that's one option to look at. And then parking. A couple of you mentioned parking, so we are looking at parking. There are about 330 on-street spaces downtown. There's 400 public spaces, not counting what's down by the bridge and so forth. So that's generally how much parking there is, not including so you got about 70 spaces in parking lots, and I think there's 48 spaces on the first floor of the deck. And I've seen 3, 6, 8 of those out of 48 use. So somebody mentioned very low use of most of the time of the parking structure. So for parking in a downtown, generally what you look for is somewhere between 60 and 85% of the spaces being used. If it's less than 60, you probably have a really weak downtown with a lot of vacancies. People aren't going to go there. If you're over 85%, you probably have too much, you've got a parking problem. Right now, you're parking at the counts that we've taken so far, overall, you're at about, on the on-street, 61%. 67% on Main Street. In the core area, like the 4 blocks for the main part of Main Street downtown, you're at 83%. So even there, at the peak time of day, like around noon, other than farmers market festivals, You've got kind of a healthy parking, but you don't have excess parking, and you don't really need tons of additional parking. So that's kind of the benchmark that we're looking at. And then we look not only the amount of parking, Caitlin mentioned parking management, where it is, how convenient it is, and people will be willing to walk a little farther, maybe a block or two, if it's a pleasant walk. So we look at how do we design the parking lots to fit into the character of the area. How do we make the parking lots beautiful instead of looking like a parking lot, making them fit into the environment with landscaping and trees, and Lori mentioned beautiful, so there are ways to have parking be more efficient and more beautiful. So we'll be looking at on-street parking and off-street parking in terms of public parking. Just a couple other ideas on parking. Sometimes here's an example of a very narrow median that kind of separates the angled parking, different ways of getting pedestrians across to the parking, different ideas of landscaping or even types of pavement in the parking lot and lighting in the parking. And then on-street parking, what you have in downtown now are two types of parking. You have your typical angle parking, so that's about a 16-foot to 18-foot space, or you have parallel parking. And then kind of one of the new things around the country you're seeing more and more is called reverse angle parking. And rather than going into details on it, we've got a little flyer on your table to familiarize you. But why reverse angle? It tends to be better for bikes. It has a lot fewer crashes when people do angled parking. That backing up can lead to crashes and people don't know. So backing in is similar to backing into a parallel space, but backing in means then you go forward going out, and so crashes go down. And if your door's open, the kids or your goods, it's easier to go to and from the sidewalk. So if you're looking at angled parking, that would be one of the new best practices that might be considered.
So I'm going to spend a minute talking about sitting, because if you look at my physique, it's obvious I'm pretty good at it. People will sit in a lot of different places. There are preferred places to sit. In the best of all worlds, people like a bench with a back. And they like that bench surface to be a material that doesn't freeze on their legs or burn their legs. So they like it to be wood or something like that. And you usually want to have it where you feel like you can observe people going by, but they're not going to kick your feet as they go by. And there have been a lot of studies done, believe it or not, on how to locate a bench in a downtown area. But what's interesting to me is that even if you look at what's preferred, people will sit on almost anything. They'll sit on a wood stair, they'll sit on some artistic sculptural wood piece that sits on the street, and then they'll sit on the planter box. This picture on the upper right is from downtown Holland during Tulip Festival. Well, people will sit anywhere, right? They'll sit on the planter, they sit on the real benches, they sit on the curbs, and sometimes they don't sit at all. They just gather and talk. A couple of interesting comments. The middle photo on the bottom is Estes Park in Colorado. And one of the interesting things they did there was they angled the benches a little bit so that it creates this conversational nook. So it's more social. You don't feel like people are going to walk by and kick your feet because you're off the path a little bit, right? And it's tilted a little bit so you can talk to the person on the next bench if you choose to, but it's not tilted so far that you have to, right? So it's a very successful placement of benches in the way to think about people sitting downtown. Another interesting image is the upper left one, which is from a little urban plaza we did in St. Clair, Michigan, on the St. Clair River. And they have chairs that you can move. They're little Adirondack chairs. You can move them around. You can tilt it to face the person you're with. You can tip it away from them if you don't want to talk to them. And it's very successful from that perspective. So downtown streets are also used for shopping and eating, and we want to create space that the merchants can use. And you have outdoor sales in town. I know we were here last year when people were doing that. So how is the sidewalk designed to accommodate that and still have people move by? And then how are your sidewalks aligned so that you can maximize the value of the window? So the shoppers are going by and they're intrigued by what you're showing. Get the next one. Another interesting perspective that's happening out in the world today is demonstrated on the lower right-hand image, or left-hand image, I'm sorry. That's a pop-up retail. That's in downtown Denver, and it's there just seasonally. This woman has a truck. She sells goods out of it. She has a permit to do so, and she's there because there's a festival going there on that day. So she pulls into a parking spot, throws her doors open, and she sells things to people going by. But the big thing that you want to convey in terms of shopping and eating is that you're open for business, right? You want people to know you're open for business, and the way you do that is you have other people there, and you have signage and landscape that says we're open for business. Keep going. Oh.
I have a quick question. My son lived in Burlington, Vermont for a number of years, and they had a 6-block, all pedestrian traffic, no cars, no vehicles. All those restaurants just merged right to the middle of the road. They must have 150 to 200 seating spots for each of the restaurants, and it was just a street artist and you name it.
Yep.
It was just a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, that's a great city, and it's a great project.
It's not that big of a city either.
Yeah, it's a great project. In fact, one of our associates that's on our project team that's not here today has been on that site a number of times, and every time we work on a project, he pulls out the pictures of Burlington because he's so struck by it, by how well it worked and what a great place it made. So, again, in terms of eating, outdoor dining is a very important component of restaurants these days, and you have to have a sidewalk and a street that are built to manage that. We're working on a project right now in Ann Arbor where the sidewalk is 12 feet wide, and you can't get a table out there except for a little cafe table that you might eat a Danish on. If you want to have a table with 4 people around it, which is the preferred way, you have to have 15 feet. And so you have to think about what are the critical dimensions of how do we make that work. And then where are the lights and the trees located so that they're not over-encumbering that, and then how do you squeeze in other things that contribute to the beauty of the street, like the landscape beds. So it's all a balancing act, but there are some very good rules of thumb that we can bring to the table. Want to hit the next one? And then at a bump out, of course, you have more space. But as we begin to design things, as we're showing on the left-hand images, when you're laying out what the streetscape elements, where are the planters, where are the lights, etc., you think about where do these tables go? How can a merchant use this space effectively to create that outdoor dining environment?
And just to add on to that, the best practice in kind of outdoor cafes and downtown environments is evolving a little bit. A lot of people are used to kind of the row of tables and the fencing right adjacent to the front of the restaurant, and that's very popular and it works well in many ways. But increasingly, it's beneficial to actually shift that out closer to the street and allow the movement to happen at the front of the building. Say I'm a retailer who has product in my front window, and now I've moved everyone away from that storefront to get out to the cafe, and now they're not seeing what's at my window, or you can't step up and see the menu. So there's some advantages to kind of thinking how that's organized. The other benefit is you have a downtown that, again, has some retail, some restaurant. It's not all restaurant. So you can have a cafe environment that might extend beyond the confines of that restaurant across the front of the store next door, because that's not space that's needed by them. So you can actually be a little bit more flexible if you shift that around. So as we get into the planning, you can think a little bit about how we might want to locate some of those things. So celebrating, this isn't always a thing that we think about when we think about streets, but increasingly we are using streets for things other than moving cars and moving people. And so we talked about closing down the street fully from cars, or maybe we're sometimes shutting down the street for art fairs or festivals or to add on, or maybe there's a couple blocks that close down for community events. But thinking about streets as places where the community happens, where living in Midland happens, and it happens in a way that expresses music, expresses art. These are all things you're already doing here, but how can we do them more? What are the kinds of things that we would like to do that allows us to connect to each other more, to bump into each other, to enjoy our families together, to bring our families in and kind of share the fun of Midland right here, to maybe express the center of the arts downtown, or what else can we do? So celebrating is a component of how we use streets as well. And so here, there's a car show, and we've taken over the street with these cars, or market buildings, and activated it at night. Another layer of the street environment that we usually don't think of is stormwater. So our stormwater, runs across the ground and goes down into the catch basins and gets piped away into the river. Well, downtown Midland, we're actually putting that into an antique system that is actually a brick storm sewer that is very old, 1800s. Infrastructure, as we're always hearing about, that needs to be upgraded and updated. And one of the most effective ways to address some of that capacity is to think about stormwater in the way that it most naturally gets managed, through systems that allow it to be infiltrated into the ground, taken up by plant material, and kind of take the pressure off of those underground pipe systems. And it also is a really beautiful and interesting addition to a street environment. So these are some examples right here in Michigan. This is a project we're working on in Grand Rapids, right in their downtown area, including rain garden system that accepts the stormwater from the sidewalk. All of that pavement gets collected into these areas. So we have planting beds that actually function from an infrastructure standpoint, which is pretty cool. Again, more examples of, this is in
Battle Creek.
So you can see it's been built, it's a beautiful addition, done in an artful way, and these are utilities at work, so it's pretty cool. Mm-hmm.
Did the city say there's an issue with stormwater management? Because I have not heard that.
It's not an issue with stormwater management other than old pipes that need to be upgraded and replaced, and so part of the process would be to evaluate which of those needed that, what is their state, where do we need to improve that. But decreasing what we're loading into those systems and what's being dumped into the river without being slowed down and filtered is a best practice in streetscape design. What can we do to kind of slow that water down, release it more slowly to the river? It addresses erosion issues and other kind of healthy river environment.
I hope if you spend money on something like that, you work with the city engineers to make sure that it's necessary, because I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, they are on our committee that's guiding us through this, and so that's obviously something we would incorporate their input on. But current standards for stormwater management are different than when the street was last rebuilt. So some of it they may even be obligated to do. So we'll have to figure out exactly what the benefits are and how that's looked at. And the other part that relates to that and relates to managing and maintaining is how are those gardens maintained. So part of the downtown is loading and unloading and providing short-term parking. And we need to look at this very carefully. Some of the best practices we're seeing, the two images on the left, incorporate loading and unloading zones that are not in the traffic lane. So it's taking up parking, but it's getting the trucks out of the travel lane and getting them off into a parking lane, and it's done in a way that the slope is consistent from the building face down to the edge of the lane. And so the nice thing about that is if you're having a festival or if a restaurant is operating in there and it's their loading and unloading is done by noon, they can then use that for dinner time use. And the photo on the right is an example of what happens when you don't really think about loading. There's a beautiful little loading area shown there, but it's about 10 feet shorter than the trucks that actually need to use it. So you have to think pretty carefully about these things and get it right.
Bob?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
When it comes to building, how do you get buy-in from distributors and suppliers to restaurants? It's like, how do you ensure, what steps do you take to ensure they're on board and they will use the loading zones?
Well, part of that is engaging the business owners, or the first step of that is engaging the business owners, and we have a meeting tomorrow morning with business owners downtown, and that's one of the topics we're going to talk about.
But it's like, even when it comes to the business owners, say, to give an example, I saw a week or so ago, if Woodcraft or one of the other bars gets a shipment from Fabiano Brothers, and Fabiano Brothers drivers are not complying with the proper zones, it's like, what is the local business who's receiving deliveries going to do? You know?
Right. Well, again, part of it's an education thing, and then the other part of it is an enforcement thing. So if it's not being managed correctly, then it has to be enforced by public safety.
But the first step in that really is to try to design a system that works as well as it can, to be more intuitive, to actually be practical for all of these users to use them, so that we actually just designed a truck pull-off that makes that the best choice that a truck driver would want to use to do this. So it's not always perfect, there's lots of gives and takes, but the goal is to find out the information up front so that we can make the most effective and most easily usable without lots of ongoing kind of moderation of it. That's the challenge that we have in front of us right now, is to design things that work well without all of them here.
So have you found, for example, there's an ideal frequency of distribution of these loading zones to get compliance with law enforcement, or?
Well, it depends city by city, and it's actually almost block by block, right? You have to look at it on a block by block basis, particularly in your core area. What are the businesses that are there, and also what is likely to happen in the future, and then locating them accordingly. It doesn't make any sense to locate them at an interval where they won't be used. So typically they have to be fairly close, almost on an every block basis or every other block basis, so that there's access. Because if somebody's not going to leave their truck for more than a couple minutes while they're unloading. So it has to be done sensibly. In some communities, they just say, look, the parking's more valuable, and the inconvenience to the driver, the vehicle, the car driver is not of significance enough to us to take up that space. And in other communities, it's very important, and they don't want those semis parked on the street, even if they're only there for an hour a day. So it really comes down to what fits your community.
You know, when I mentioned there's pros and cons, like one-way versus two-way. When you have two lanes in one direction, a stop service vehicle, you still got a lane to go through. If you have two-way, that vehicle, if it stops, then you've got to go around the service vehicle. The delivery vehicle can increase crash and so forth. So again, that's one of the factors in one versus two-way. You have to look. There's a lot of consequences of either kind of street.
So we want to keep on schedule. And I know I'm the biggest culprit for talking too much. So let's keep moving. This part of managing and maintaining your downtown is understanding how you're going to manage snow. And we have to give that some thought right up front, because if you don't, you just get snow piles everywhere, and it impedes the progress of pedestrians, and it frustrates the merchants who have a difficult time keeping the path clear. Yes, sir.
One thing I've noticed is that bricks tend to be slipperier than concrete.
Yes.
And boy, you can really, this is a town that's a lot of older people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say that without prejudging what our design alternatives might be, I will say that best practices in many communities is to keep that pedestrian travel way simple poured concrete. And where you use bricks, you use them as accents, and you use them in the strip that has the lights and everything else in it. Because of that reason. Okay. And then durability, of course, has to go to what materials are you using? Is it going to be built to last? And is it going to hold up over time, both from a stylistic sense as well as a maintenance sense?
So enjoying the urban environment, this is a general thing, but you know, there are a lot of demands on a downtown street. We've talked about a lot of them. A lot of them aren't real fun and they aren't real pretty. They're tricky. There's service and loading. There's parking, there's maintenance, there's snow removal, there's trash collection, there's a lot of things. At the same time, we want to balance those against what it's there for in the first place. It's there for us to be downtown, for us to be enjoying our downtown environment, for us to run into each other and have interactions, and for us to engage and for us to express ourselves to the larger world as people come and visit. People come from other towns, other countries even. How do they experience Midland? And so there are special things, there are special moments that want to have a place here. And what are those going to be? What do you want them to be? How do you want them to feel? Or how do you want them to look? Do you want them to change? How do we think about lighting? Lighting is a great opportunity. We have, you know, it's dark at 5 o'clock for several, you know, a month or two out of the year, and we have a lot of nighttime opportunity. How do we extend the way we enjoy downtown into the night, into the fall, into the winter, into the spring? And lighting can be a really great way to do that. Do we think about, you can look at a spectrum of style of lighting fixtures. You see those during the day. We can think about traditional, kind of semi-traditional, something kind of really more modern and unique. Then we can think about facade lighting and other layers of lighting that really create and craft an experience that transforms a place at night.
One of the things that's come a long way in the last 25 years is how we think about downtown street trees and how we install them so that they have a chance to thrive. And one of the basic ways is to put them in open planters like was done here 25 years ago. That's why you have healthy, reasonably healthy, mature trees. Some of the techniques we're using now where we don't have room to do that are broadening that soil area underneath the sidewalk so that the tree can thrive even if it is growing out of a tree grate or a smaller area. So we'll be looking at options like that. We also want to talk about how do we connect to the riverfront. This is in Racine, Wisconsin. Obviously, your water's not quite as big as they're looking at. But the idea is there. How are we using Ashman and McDonald and Rod to connect to the water, right? And then the idea of finding places where you can create a little center, a little social nook. This is a little plaza in Ann Arbor that our firm did back in the 60s. It was kind of, you can tell by the look of the sculpture maybe. Looks a little like 1967. But it's a great little place, right? It's a thriving little corner and it's probably 400 square feet in size, right? Maybe 600. That's your Wi-Fi.
Okay, yeah, so technology. So, you know, streets are places where we're doing a lot of things that we didn't always do them, or sometimes we're even working out at a cafe table or sitting. We're bringing our laptops, we have our phones, everything is mobile. How can we incorporate that in a way that makes sense? What are the technologies that make sense for us to utilize? Incorporating Wi-Fi into light poles, other systems, is a technology that's available to us. Data connections, we talked about power, we can talk about audio systems and sound systems wherever they're appropriate or if they're appropriate. But this is finding the flexibility in what we're building to accommodate technology and technology that can evolve, not necessarily just today's technology, because by the time it gets built, it'll be yesterday's technology. But this is the thing that streets are more and more providing so that we can have events and hook up what we need to hook up. We can do special lighting for the holidays. We can hook up sound systems for a little stage setup throughout, you know, the year. We can have festivals and markets and those things. So we want to make sure we build that into the system so that we can really hook up as we need to. And then, you know, the thing that we often start with, but we're going to kind of end with, is kind of what the community character is that we want to communicate and express. And these are all kind of images of Midland now, Midland throughout the years. We have our beautiful gardens, our interesting architecture, our recognition of the legacy of innovation, and would really like to start the conversation about what does that look like to you? What does Midland look like to you that we're building today? Not necessarily the building, what we built before, but what do we want that to be? And go to the next slide. So, you know, in Denver, we have, you know, the bison coming down the street expressing kind of the regional character. In Chinatown, you know, so maybe one of those is what, no, neither of those is what you want. No, there's something unique for Midland. There's something unique about Midland that we want to express. And even for any city in Michigan in the Midwest, Midland is unique. We have, it's obvious, I'm sure, to everyone in this room. And the downtown has the opportunity to express that.
So, now we're going to do our little small group discussion. We'll leave this slide up. We may bounce a little around before we get you started, but we're going to give you a little description of what we're going to do. Can everybody read this slide? We're going to start by having you introduce yourselves to the people around your table, if you don't know each other. We want you to assign a person to record what the discussion. And there's pads of paper and pens there. And we want you to discuss two sets of questions. The first set is, what activities and events do you enjoy downtown? What's missing? And what could we do downtown? And I would urge you to think about it not only from your own perspective, but think about it from the perspective of somebody who's visited or who may want to look at, who's looking at Midland as a prospective place to move to.
Or maybe your son or daughter went away to college and you're like, come back to Midland. This is why.
So then we want you to write those ideas down on a pad of paper. And then we want you guys as a group, maybe you'll have 12 things, maybe you'll have 20. We want you to take the colored dots that you have at your place, okay, and then we want you to pass that tablet around and you put your dot on your priorities. So if your priority is a party every Friday night in downtown, put the dot there. If your priority is, I just want a nice place to sit, put your dot there. Does everybody understand what I'm getting at?
If your top 3 priorities are I want somewhere to party every Friday night, put 3 dots next to that.
Right.
It's okay to put, you know, to load them up. It's an expression of what you care about.
So, yeah, that's right. You only get 3 dots.
That's right.
But what I would suggest is the recorders space out the information you're writing so you've got room for the dots to come up. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes doing that. And then we're going to move to a second question is, how should or can the design of the downtown streets change to accommodate those activities and events? What are the important elements of the design? What are the priorities? Okay? And then we'll do the dot voting again. And then the person who does the recording, unless they hand the job to somebody else, we'll go around the room and you'll have 60 seconds to tell us what your table came up with. Okay?
And here's a tip. Look at the name tags at your table, and whoever has the best penmanship should probably be your recorder.
Before we start, on your tables are a couple things. One is just a copy of all the slides you just saw. There's a lot of stuff we talked about, so this might stimulate some conversation or remind you of something, or maybe there was something that you really liked. Feel free to just reference that. Also on your table, for those who are kind of graphically or spatially inclined, that's not everybody, but we have what is basically two different, a 60-foot wide and a 100-foot wide street, and a grid that's 5 feet wide. And you could kind of use this to say, okay, well, we could use this much of the space to be landscape, or this much of the space to be parking, or this to be street. We divide it up this way and kind of use this as a way to think about all of those relationships, because 100 feet is 100 feet. It's not 150 or 150 80, there's only so much that we have to work with. So this kind of helps you put that in perspective.
And just for perspective, Main Street is 100 foot right away, and the other streets in downtown are 66, somewhere in that range, so that gives you some indication.
And you have little cheat cards that those of you that want to kind of sketch ideas out. We have little cheat cards under your candy dish that show you the right-of-way on the streets, and like a traffic lane is 10, 11, 12 feet wide, a parking lane 7 or 8 feet, a bike lane at least 5 feet, how wide the sidewalk is. You can kind of draw what you think would be an ideal street.
Okay, so we have, it's now 7 o'clock on the dot. At 7:30, we'll blow the whistle and we'll report out. I would suggest if you have a small table and you want to have a little more interaction, you may want to get up and join another table. And that way it reduces the likelihood that you'll have to be the recorder.
To be a micro list of all what's here or missing, and then you say, okay, all these activities here and missing, what is most
It's a big attraction for a lot of people. And then
all of the, although I must say these are very strange pictures. But I think it's a fun thing, and I think a lot of cities are doing it.
All of the
So many of those places taking up space in downtown.
Right, they're all destinations. It's like you have to want to go.
all of the outlets are occupied by the Christmas lights.
Let me bring your mic.
I can be the runner, but I'm already warmed up.
Okay, for activities and events that we enjoy, our most popular one were Loons Games and the Farmers Market, the Tridge and the Rail Trail, eating, just eating in general, so lots of restaurants, the Beer Festival, got some boats, and the fireworks got some boats. Other things on there were family-oriented events, kayaking, the sculpture event, and the summertime sculpture event, River Days, and the Santa House and school. What's missing? Gathering places such as squares. I know what you meant by that, but I put squares. Any place where there's seating and places for people to gather. A fountain, a fire pit, restrooms for the public. Very important were considered more retail and affordable rents. We saw that as a problem. Landowners or building owners more interested in Midland and the downtown development. More seating such as picnic tables or eating outside. Okay, signage of what's happening in different areas and food truck area.
Okay, excellent. What I think is interesting about your list of activities you like to do are, it's mostly things that are connected to downtown, but that aren't in downtown. So it's, and they're kind of all over downtown. Some of down the river and other places. So it really speaks to that idea that we need to connect downtown to those places.
Okay. About designing our downtown streetscape. We had the idea of closing Main Street for extra seating and whatever else that would bring. Also, if not doing that, reducing the speed limit definitely. Very popular was the snow melt for downtown, for the couple blocks downtown, where the retail stores and the restaurants are. No parking on Main Street during special events. A free bus shuttle from Riverside to the Midland Center for the Arts. Somebody had the idea of vertical gardens. Also, we had the idea of moving the M20 bridge for more space.
Think big.
We talked about better lighting, but also the utilization of solar power.
Okay, great.
Right.
Okay, let's pass the microphone to the next table.
Right.
Thank you. And we had a big list too, and we narrowed it down to what we thought was the most important, two most important things were farmers market, and then, or what people enjoy, what we enjoyed the most is eating downtown. And we had a whole list like they did of other things, it only got a couple dots or not. We thought one of the things that we could have is like heaters throughout the downtown for the fall or the spring when it's a little chilly. And then the biggest thing was a unique gathering spot. So, you know, basically, hey, let's meet down at wherever, you know. I mean, we do have the church, of course, but I mean like a fountain or a fire, you know, pit or whatever. And then also make more use of the river walk, have a nice river walk with attractions and things like that. And then we also talked, are we on the second part yet or not?
You can go however you want to go.
All right. Oh, okay. Well, no, how did the design of the chain, the way we would have to change to accommodate some of this stuff, we talked about the lighting obviously needs to be improved, and I'm sure it's going to be, but, you know, decorative and charming. And then the other big one was, this one I'm not exactly sure what we meant here, to tell you the truth, but oh, that's what we talked about. Yeah, like the suggestion that I thought was a very good one was where you have a restaurant and move the dining away from the storefront, so your traffic flow in front of the windows, and extend it beyond the storefront to in front of a building that isn't a restaurant, so you can use the streetscape, and we thought that was a very good idea.
Excellent. All right, next table.
Activities and events that this group enjoys downtown is Ace Hardware and eating and shopping. Events such as Tunes by the Tridge, Labor Day walk, fireworks, that sort of thing. What the group feels is missing is possibly a grocery store. We wondered about people at Riverside being interested, and then if there are more people living downtown, maybe they would also be interested. Plus, if you're downtown shopping or working downtown, you could grab bread, milk, whatever, for your way home. And the suggestion was made that there might be more normal stores downtown, not just art things or very expensive items. We haven't defined exactly what normal stores means, but anyway, you can think on that.
Not even lots of stores that people actually shop at. Right down along.
Besides Ace Hardware. Okay. And events, I think that people could come up with some more events that would bring people downtown. One suggestion was something like a starving artist show, something like that, or other similar type things. How the design should be changed. Parking needs to be in more convenient areas. The current parking garage is intimidating to elderly people who find the walls too high and it's dark in there and it's a rather isolated place. So if a parking unit were made, it could be redesigned to make it more user-friendly and not so scary. Also, parking be closer to the shopping and the eateries, and bricks are slippery. So if we were thinking of ideas that might be important to incorporate for the next round, would be to stay away from everybody walking on slippery bricks. And do not close Main Street was one suggestion.
Okay. the group or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's a well-known group.
All right.
This is kind of a little mishmash of 3 and 4. So we kind of focused on the things that we felt were missing and needed improving. So top one was more outdoor dining space for drinking coffee, etc. Meeting, including the ideas of small meeting areas to assemble. The second one was actually reasons to actually go to Main Street, to hang out down there. So not just to buy trinkets or candy, but things like museums, libraries, other things that attract people to go and sit and talk and meet people.
I think that comment was shared with you guys, wasn't it? One of the tables mentioned that.
Yeah. Better facilities for walking and bicycling. Several people like biking, walking to there, down there, which is kind of a broader question, not just the Main Street, but that whole downtown area and access down to the riverfront and to the Penn Market, etc. And then more space for events driven by more events. So be it for street musicians. I didn't know you were a street musician, John. But other kinds of events, not, there are lots of great ones, but somehow we need to create this environment so that more people actually want to put events on and go and do things down there. We didn't get down to some of the detail which other tables have mentioned, which are, some of the design features. They're all here.
Well, that's great. Good input.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, the things we talked about as far as activities that enjoy downtown, farmers market, eating, drinking, and enjoying the river. Things that what's missing, what stood out was identity. What stops you coming downtown? Talked about you come down M20 and you could just come right by Main Street. Not what do you see when you come in? And recognizing that there's something there. One of the things talked about as far as identity was having areas that have been mentioned, like fireplaces around to set something unique, like the Bean in Chicago, or river fountains that they have in Branson. We talked about, and then also using the buildings, because a lot of the back of the buildings are what faces the river instead of making them front. So the river is used better or seen better. And then as far as design, street change, really like the idea of the reverse angle parking, remove traffic signals, so four-way stops, and then widen the sidewalks.
All right, excellent.
I'll come to you.
Okay, for question number 3, we came up with River Days, Santa House, local pubs and restaurants, our beloved Veterans Memorial, and the Memorial Parade are the favorites among our little group. And as far as what's missing is, this is all kind of together, is the FCC Wi-Fi charging stations with better power and extended utilities. I think that kind of all goes together. Lavatories and more handicap parking with the lower mile per hour will make a huge difference in the safety issues. Signage for restrooms, parking in the downtown area itself, and restaurants. Well, I think restaurants and pubs went together. And we didn't get to number 4.
It is interesting, my wife and I went over to see the Tulip Festival. In 54 years we've lived in Michigan, we've never been to the Tulip Festival, right? So we gotta go. And what I was most surprised by, I expected the downtown to be well maintained and everything, but they had public bathrooms. on the street that were clean and functioning. And as a visitor from out of town, it was a huge difference to your experience.
City also have things.
Yeah.
So for our group, the activities and events that we enjoy downtown is definitely the farmer's market, had a lot of points. And the next one was anything that has to do on the sidewalk. So like the sidewalk sales, the salsa cook-off, things like that. Most of our list was things missing. So like the emotional connection, whether through music or lighting, something that makes downtown inviting. Connection between the shops and streetscapes, how to pull the stores out and make more dynamic. And then less planners, more people space. And then destination places are definitely missing downtown. For question 4, we definitely found important is the outdoor seating for restaurants. And then again, reduce planners, use space more efficiently. And then how to make downtown softer, not so much hardscape.
How's it going? Oh boy. Volume of my voice. Okay, here we go. So what activities and events did we enjoy? We talked about the farmer's market, that got the most circles. We talked about river days. Then we tapped on the Tapped Beer Fest. Christmas time activities, Santa Parade and Santa House, etc. Christmas themed things. And as far as things that were missing, we talked about bike-friendly environment away from the Tridge area. Also decorative lighting, playground equipment and interactive sidewalk area, and also more restaurants. Was missing. For number 4, in design, we touched on wider sidewalks on Main Street, more trees and green space with floral arrangements, especially off Main Street, more plants and flowers. Then we talked about building a bridge across the river on the south end to allow a circular path, like by Founder's Garden.
Yeah.
Then we also touched on a, kind of going along the theme of the City of Modern Explorers, Midland. We talked about technology-based futuristic decor as a theme in downtown. Kind of like uplighting and, certain type of lighting up. Not to replace the lighting that's already there, but just to add a little bit more of a chemistry-based themed futuristic stuff. And then last but not least, for design, interpretive signs to honor the history of downtown.
Excellent ideas.
Okay, our next group.
Okay, so the things that we like to do downtown, restaurants and bars, 1. Farmers market, and then events such as River Days, the Tapped Beer Festival, Tunes by the Tridge, and the New Year's celebration came up. Things that we thought were missing, shopping, grocery store was the big winner, restaurants, and then we liked the idea of a city square or a city center, so we thought that was missing. And then even affordable housing for young professionals downtown. And then how should the design of downtown streets change to accommodate current and future things? Bike paths, 1, as well as widening sidewalks to allow for outdoor seating for restaurants. We talked about overnight parking, so there's no restrictions parking at night, so people can feel like they can leave their car if they go out for a drink or dinner. And angled seating. We also talked about please don't cut down the trees.
All right. Well, that's a great range of input. And we always, when we do this kind of exercise, we'll often see similarities between what different groups are thinking. And what I thought was interesting today was there was some thread of similarities, but then there was also a very broad range of ideas. And I think what's really rewarding, for me at least, is that there's a lot of these ideas that we wouldn't have thought about had we not, asked the question. So some of these things that we can incorporate into our thinking, because in 3 weeks we're coming back with some design alternatives for you to consider and give us your impression on. So that's.
So be sure to leave your sheets, your markups, whatever you have, leave them on the table. So when we're done tonight, we're going to keep those. Just we kind of go through them.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is we'll scan those and then post them to the site that Selena has set up. You want to talk about that for a second, Selena?
Sure. You can follow, where we've been from start to finish with this whole process at our cityofmidlandmi.gov/downtown development. So that's our primary website for all of this, and we'll be posting, any upcoming meetings, all the outcomes, reports, all of that will be there. There's some sheets on your table about upcoming meetings and other opportunities to put on your calendar. We encourage you to sign up for eCity Hall. It's our new online engagement tool that will also be posting surveys and questions and feedback opportunities as our designers start working through this process and getting online engagement that way as well. So there's a sheet on your tables that outlines all of that for you. So take a look and check us out, like our downtown Facebook page, and we do a lot of posting there too.
Please repeat the original City of Midland address.
And it's on that sheet also. It's our City of Midland website, cityofmidlandmi.gov/downtown development. Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, so very briefly before we go, I want to talk a little bit about the meetings that are coming up that are on the calendar. The next one is 3 weeks from today, June 23rd and 24th. The location is to be announced. We don't have a location set yet. But what we're going to be bringing back to you are some alternative design plans. So it'll be a series of ideas, and we'll want you to sit in small groups again and talk about these ideas and what has merit and what doesn't. And that's what's going to be fun, is watching how people respond to these various ideas. Then our job on the 24th is to sit in a space in downtown to be determined, and we're going to try to draw up what represents the consensus of the group that shows up on the 23rd. So your participation on the 23rd is going to be critical. And while we're working on the 24th, we're inviting people to just stop by and watch us work. And I'll probably even be breaking out in a sweat, and you can laugh at that. I'm pretty sure, because we'll be working our little hands fast as we can. At the next meeting on the 23rd, also, we will be bringing back some of the results of the traffic modeling that's been doing. Wes's firm, DLZ, has been taking counts in the downtown area and is putting those counts currently into a traffic model to evaluate the potential for converting the Ashley-Rod combo into two-way, if that works or if it doesn't. And then also the potential for having, I think as one of the groups suggested, taking the signals out of downtown on Main Street and just have those be four-way stops or some other configuration. So that isn't to say that any of those particular ideas we've already thought, Jesus is a great idea, let's do it. But we thought if we're going to make a judgment call on is this a good idea or not, then we should have the results of a thorough traffic analysis that then you can help us decide what the alternatives that are best suited to Midland. So then the meeting following that, I think it's 3 weeks after that, plus or minus, I think it's on a Wednesday night, is workshop number 3. And at that workshop, we're going to be bringing back to you a draft plan. So we'll have thought through some of these details, assessed costs, and what we want you to do there is come to that meeting and then tell us whether we heard you correctly. Did the ideas that we talked about in the meeting on the 23rd and 24th, Are those still in the plan, and why or why not? And what does it really hold together and represent what's a great plan for downtown Midland? So, with that said, we'll thank you as a team for your participation, invite you to continue to be involved, and if you have any questions, you feel free to come up and talk to us while we're putting things away. And thanks for coming out.